I hope this is a good angle and that the lighting is okay, because I have seriously been at this for like 15 minutes trying to figure out how to do this. So, welcome. My name is Savannah, and today I'm going to be talking about my birth story. Or I guess maybe my labor and delivery story. I love watching these. I loved watching these whenever I was pregnant with my first, and whenever I have the time, I enjoy watching them now. And plus, I thought, what cooler way for my first real video than to introduce this channel than for it to be the birth of my daughter and the birth of me, as relatively short, because I feel like it's very easy for these labor and delivery stories to go on and on, because of course, because it's so awesome and it's just such a powerful experience. But for my own sake, I'm gonna try to keep this relatively short. So, to preface, I had planned on having a hospital unmedicated birth. That was my original plan. And I had a relatively healthy pregnancy. I wasn't particularly healthy, but the baby was healthy, everything was going fine. And I went to exactly 41 weeks. I went into my doctor. I had a scheduled OB appointment on July 17th, 2018. And I went in that morning and she checked me, and I was a centimeter dilated, which I had been a centimeter dilated for, oh my gosh, probably about 2 weeks at that point. And so I went in at about 8:30 that morning, and I hadn't really tried everything, all of the wives' tales and everything like that. I had gotten on my birthing ball and just moved my hips a little bit, and I don't think that anything I did really contributed to me going into labor. But I had been scheduled for an induction for the following week, because at that point I would be 42 weeks, and the practice that I go to does not allow you to go beyond 42 weeks. And so at 6:30 that night, my water broke just out of nowhere. I had went to the bathroom, I peed, I stood up, I took a few steps, and then my water broke. And it was such a bizarre feeling. I was just stood there in shock for a few minutes, and I had my phone on me, and I called Matthew, and he was in the shower, and he actually answered. And actually it would have been really cool if I had done this with him. That would be really awesome to hear his take. Maybe we'll do a video together and he can share his perspective. But anyway, I called him and he answered, and he was in the shower downstairs. And I was like, I think my water just broke. And he was like, oh my gosh, really? Oh wow. And he was freaking out. And then I called my sister, my older sister, who was mowing the yard. We were all living together with my mom at this point. And she was mowing the yard, and I called her or texted her, and I was like, I think my water just broke. And she came up the stairs and she looked, and I was still standing there, I hadn't moved. And she looked and she was like, oh my gosh, yes, you did. And she actually took a picture. And if there's anything that I regret about my experience, it's that I didn't video anything. I didn't take any pictures. I didn't take any notes. Really the only pictures I have are ones that my sister took. So I'm thankful that she thought to take those pictures. But I had heard so many stories and I had read so many things about how labor will start and then it stops. Of course, my situation was the classic movie, the water breaks and you go into labor. So I went for a walk, me and Matthew went for a walk, and I put on a Depend because water was just continuously leaking out of me. And so I put on a Depend and we went for a walk, and within 30 minutes my contractions started. They were not that bad. They were kind of irregular, but to be that, looking back, to be that early in labor, they were actually pretty consistent. And so we went for a walk. My contractions, by the time we got back, my contractions were becoming more painful to the point where I'd have to kind of stop and just take a deep breath. They were more than just like minor cramps. And we went for a pretty short walk. It was maybe 15-20 minutes. And then we decided to go eat, and I have no idea why we did this, but we went to KFC, and I don't even like KFC, but we went and we ate there, and we got drive-through, and it's hilarious. I don't want to tell too much of Matthew's side of the story, but he has no recollection of us going, and I know for a fact that we went. My mom and my sister both remember that we went to KFC, but Matthew is just so in this other zone that he has no recollection of that. And then so that was probably around, my water broke at 6:30, and probably at around 8, after our walk and we ate and everything, I was still so concerned about my contractions and labor stalling, and so we went upstairs to our bedroom and I got on the birthing ball and I just started moving my hips and doing some light bouncing, and we tried to put a movie on. It was some, like, I want to say it was Noah's Ark or something. It was like an animated movie that my younger sister said was really cute. And I had read so many things about how when you're in early labor, just try to get your mind off of it and watch a movie. And so I tried to do that, and I could not focus. I was so consumed with the thought and all of the feelings that were coming in that I was about to have my baby. And so we tried watching a movie, and honestly, my contractions got pretty intense. They were pretty strong, and I wasn't really keeping track of them. I was just trying to get through them, and Matthew and I used the Rebozo method, and another video that I want to do in the future is how I prepared for labor, how I'm preparing for labor now, because I am going to attempt a VBAC, which I'll get to that in a minute if you've already seen the title, but I did end up having a C-section, and I'll be getting more into that in a minute. But we used the Rebozo method, and it was so incredibly helpful. And so every time I had a contraction, Matthew was there with the Rebozo, and to be honest with you, I was so in the zone of just getting through my contractions, and they were happening at a regular enough space and speed and time that I really lost track of time. And before I knew it, it was like 10:30, and I honestly, I can't even, it did not seem like that much time had passed. It felt like seconds, it felt like minutes had passed since we got back from KFC. And my mom and my older sister, they were downstairs, and Matthew and I had wanted to keep things pretty much just me and him until it got to the point that we needed some extra support. And so they were trying so hard to be very respectful of that. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I don't want to scare anyone, but people say that you forget the contractions, or you don't remember the pain, but I remember it like it was yesterday. Of course, it wasn't that long ago for me. It was only 2 years ago. But I was having this contraction that was so intense and so long. It felt like nothing was making it better. The Rebozo helped, but it felt like every type of pain you can experience at once. It was stabbing, it was sharp, it was dull. It was just every type of pain. I felt like every bone was breaking. And again, I don't want to scare anybody, but it was just, it was the most intensely painful contraction that I had had. And I remember I was on all fours, and I look up and I see my mom poking her head around the door to the stairs. And she was like, Savannah, I think it's time for you to go to the hospital. And Matthew had been wanting us to go to the hospital hours ago. Of course, I didn't realize that much time had passed. And again, I had read so many stories that I had been like prepared to feel like I was dying, because that's what everybody said that transition would feel like, that labor feels like whenever you start getting towards the end of it and towards, the transition. And so I was prepared to feel like I was having a hard time with keeping control of my pain and managing it. And so when my mom said that it was time to go to the hospital, I was like, I don't think it's time, and I don't know how I'm going to get down the stairs, which should have been a red flag to me, because my contractions were so close together at that point that I didn't know how I was going to get down the stairs without having a contraction. And the stairs are just 12 steps. And so my mom was like, oh, we'll get you down the steps. And so we make it down the stairs. Right at the foot of the stairs, I get another contraction, down on all fours. And then I stand up, and my older sister was there. And Matthew and my mom were like, okay, yeah, like it's time to go to the hospital. And they're trying to rush me. And I'm sorry I keep looking away. I'm not really used to looking at the camera, and I kind of look all over the place whenever I'm talking. But anyway, my mom had made this electrolyte drink, all natural drink that I wanted to be drinking when I was in labor. And I remembered I wanted to take it to the hospital with me. And so I opened the refrigerator, and I'm just looking in it blankly. And Matthew's like, what are you doing? We should be going to the hospital. And I was like, I want that drink. And so my sister gave it to me, and she was telling me how great I was and how strong I was and how they would be there at the hospital ASAP. So we get in the car, and I told my mom, she had helped me, and she was standing at the car door, the window was down, and I was like, Mom, I'm gonna get there and they're just gonna send me home, and I'm not even gonna be dilated, because again, I had read so many stories about how they're in such agonizing pain, they get to the hospital and they're not even dilated a centimeter and they get sent home. And so she was like, oh no, you're dilated. And I think she said that you're in transition, like I know that you, and I am so thankful that my mom was there, because to be honest, if my mom hadn't been there, I probably would have given birth to Hattie at home, which was not my plan, and it actually could have been very dangerous. My mom has had a home birth. My mom had 3 home births. My little sister had a home birth, so I'm not against them at all. But for me, it could have actually been very dangerous. We got to the hospital at about 11, and my mom only lived like 2 to 5 minutes away from the hospital. So we got there and I was having contractions the whole time, and we walk in to the ER and then they put me in a wheelchair, take me up to my room, and the nurse comes in and she checks me and she's like, oh, you're 6 centimeters dilated. Yeah, you're definitely in labor. And she put the belly monitor and got my IV and everything ready. And I'm trying to remember. I'm so glad I'm doing this, because I'm telling you, if you've had a baby, write it down, video yourself telling the story, because the details, they really do, they start to fade. And I'm so glad I'm doing this, because anyway, I'm glad I'm doing this right now. So we get there and she checked me and everything, and she was I guess the belly monitor was monitoring my contractions, and she was like, oh wow, yeah, you're definitely having some very strong contractions. And I'm so blessed and thankful, because my OB was actually the one on call. And so the nurse, after she checked me, she was like, I think there might be like a water pocket or something. I don't know. I'm just gonna go get your doctor and have her come and take a look for herself, which I didn't really think a whole lot about. And so my doctor comes in, checks me, and then has this portable ultrasound, and she looks, and surprise, my baby was breech, and we had no idea. I had just gone that morning, and my doctor thought that she had felt the head, but she most likely felt Hadassah's little butt. And so I had to have an emergency C-section. And I remember when my doctor told me that, my mom and Hannah, they were not there yet, I don't think. See, the details they begin to become so fuzzy. My legs are falling asleep. But I remember her telling me that, and she was saying, because you're a first-time mom, we do not deliver breech babies at this hospital vaginally for first-time mothers. And I felt disappointed, but I also, my brain just switched, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna see my baby in like an hour, because you know, with labor, you don't know how long it's going to be. You don't know how long you're going to progress. And it was just like a definite, oh my gosh, I'm going to see her like really soon. And so I tried to focus on that. And then my mom and my sister came in, and they were just like, so I could tell they were so sad for me, because I had just labored for hours and naturally, and then needed to have that C-section. And so they ended up having to leave, and the nurses were very quickly trying to get me prepped for surgery, and my body was dilating so fast that they actually thought they were going to have to put me completely under, and so I wouldn't have even been awake during my C-section. But thankfully, so thankful for the OR team that they had, and for my OB, because I was able to be awake during my C-section. And I will say the probably the worst part of it all for me during that experience was getting catheterized and feeling everything. It was awful. It was terrible. And so we get into the OR, and Matthew was able to go in there with me, and I was having contractions this whole time. And that was whenever I started feeling like I was losing control. I remember looking at Matthew and telling him, I can't do this, which up until that point, I had never felt that way. And it wasn't even a pain thing. It was like, this pain is no longer serving me. This pain is no longer bringing me closer to something, because now I'm having to have a C-section, and so this pain, it felt meaningless almost. And so that was really hard to get my brain and my mind back on track. And I remember Matthew being like, yes, you can. We prepared for this, because we did so many affirmations and everything together, which I would like to, like I said, I want to do a video on how I prepared for birth and things that I learned and how I'm preparing for this second one. So anyway, that was really hard to be in pain, because whenever I was in pain before, I was like, each contraction is bringing me closer to Hadassah. Each contraction is bringing me closer to my goal. And then that switch was really hard for me. And so we got into the OR, and I was alone. Well, I wasn't alone. I had the whole OR team. But Matthew couldn't be in there with me while I was getting the spinal, because I had to be numb from my chest down. And that was extremely hard to do, because I was having very intense contractions. I actually dilated to a 9. And it took them 2 times to try to get it in. That was very, very hard, because you have this big pregnant belly, and I think epidurals are similar, but you have to lean forward so your spine is visible, and so they can get in between your vertebrae. Sorry, that sounds really gross and cringy, but that was really hard to do with contractions. And I remember the nurse in front of me just telling me, like, squeeze my hands as hard as you have to, like, do whatever you need to do to get through this. We've got you, we've got this. And I remember just thinking, like, nothing is going to help this. Like, it doesn't matter how hard I squeeze, like, this pain nothing is going to make this go away. Nothing is going to make this process easier. And so finally they got the spinal. It kicked in very quickly. My body finally stopped. I guess that stopped me going into labor. I don't know. They were able to get everything done that they needed to get done. Matthew came in, and then they started surgery, and oh my gosh, I'm gonna get emotional. I can't believe I'm getting emotional. I actually wondered if I would, and I was like, no, I'm not gonna cry. But I remember just, you know, I didn't even take Tylenol during my pregnancy. And so having just like those surge of drugs in my body was, it definitely made my senses dulled. But I remember laying there and my doctor saying, oh, I see her little butt. It's a cute little butt. And I remember just tears. And then I remember when they finally got her out and Matthew was standing there, and all I could see was her head, just the back of her head. She had black hair, just a little bit. And I'm so glad I'm doing this. And I remember hearing her cry and just tears. I just cried, and Matthew, I looked up at Matthew and he was looking at her and he was like, oh my gosh, Savannah, she looks like you. And And then I didn't really even get that great of a view of her because, amazingly enough, they were actually able to do skin to skin, which I know a lot of women who have C-sections don't get to do that. And I was just so blessed because they laid her on my chest. And I kept trying to look at her, but I couldn't really, see her. And so I remember her just holding her, and there was a NICU nurse who was standing there, and Hadassah was already so alert. She was lifting her head up and she was trying to nurse, and the NICU nurse kept trying to help get her on the boob, and I was just so not really there that I couldn't really even help. Tried to get her on my boob, and Matthew got to cut the cord, which was really cool. I'll let him talk about that experience, but I remember, and I remembered this just a few days ago, and that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to sit down and film this. And so what I remembered was I started shaking, and I realized now that what was happening is my body was going into shock, because and I just had so much appreciation for my body when I realized this a few days ago, because I was just like, wow, my body was being cut open. My body has never gone through anything like that before, and this life that was growing in my body was taken out and was cut open. My insides were taken out and put back in, and I was shaking, and I just had so much appreciation and for the first time, love for my body, because I was like, wow, you did such a big thing. And another reason why I want to film this is because I feel like so many women, they give birth to these babies, whether they have them vaginally or C-sections, scheduled C-section, emergency C-section, epidural, no epidural, home birth, hospital birth, whatever it is, and we don't stop and think. This 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, and for the first time since then, I stopped and I was like, holy crap, my body is amazing. I just felt so much respect and love for my body and for what it went through and for what it accomplished. And I hope that you can feel that too, whether you've already had your babies or you're preparing to give birth, or you just found out you're pregnant and your body is going through these changes. It's so amazing, and it's such a blessing, and your body is amazing and beautiful, and it's doing this amazing thing. And so I just wanted to say that because it was such a powerful moment for me. And I know some women experience those feelings very quickly. Some never do. I don't think most do. And then for some, me, it was almost 2 years later. And so I got sewn back up, and I was taken to our room, and we stayed in that one room. Hadassah stayed with me the whole time. I tried to nurse her, and that was a bit hard, just because I had very limited range of movement, but just instinctually I wanted to nurse her. And I'd love to talk more about my nursing experience, but and she was born at 12:29, and so I was in labor from my water breaking to her being born via emergency C-section for 6 hours. And so that's actually really cool, because I don't know how long I would have pushed, but if I would have been able to have had her vaginally, I probably would have only had like a 6.5, 7 hour labor. So that's really cool to think about, and as I prepare for my second daughter's birth. But yeah, that is the story of Hadassah Estelle being born, me being born as a mother, and I definitely want to dive into more of my birth experience, my postpartum experience, and just being a new mom. And so I hope that my story somehow encourages you. If you have any questions, please email me. I would love to talk about anything. I love talking about birth and preparing for birth. And so thank you so much for listening, if anybody's watching this. And Hadassah, if you watch this one day, I hope that you do, and I hope that you know that it was the best day of my life, and I would do it all over again. Okay, wow. And mamas, I want you to know that you are amazing, you are incredible, whether you've had babies, you're preparing, you're trying to conceive, you are a foster mother, an adoptive mother, a stepmother, you are amazing. You are amazing. And thank you so much for watching, and y'all have a wonderful day.